AITA for refusing to share my vacation home with my in-laws for 6 months after they sold their house without consulting me. They wanted to rent out our house to make money. I never thought I would be in this position. I have always tried to be accommodating, understanding, and a good daughter-in-law, but this situation has pushed me to my absolute limit, and now I am questioning everything. So, let me explain. My husband and I have been married for 5 years, and for most of that time, our marriage has been solid. We communicate well, support each other, and make decisions together. One of our biggest accomplishments as a couple has been the vacation home we built together, a beautiful beach house that we poured our hearts, souls, and frankly, a lot of money into. It is not just a place we visit occasionally, it is part of our lifestyle. We go there frequently throughout the year, host friends and family, and even rent it out during peak seasons to offset the costs. This place is our escape, our sanctuary, and honestly, a huge source of pride for both of us. My in-laws have always been welcome guests. They have stayed with us for short visits, and while they have contributed a little financially toward the maintenance, it has never been anything significant. We have never asked them to pay anything, but they would occasionally offer some money toward utilities or small repairs. It was fine, and I never had any complaints about it. They always talked about how much they loved our vacation home, and I took it as the usual admiration anyone would have for a beautiful beachfront property, not as a sign of something more concerning. Then, last month, out of nowhere, they dropped a bombshell on us. They were selling their house. Just like that. No prior discussion, no warning, nothing. They had already accepted an offer and were set to close in just a couple of weeks. Apparently, this was something they had been planning for months, keeping it completely to themselves, and now it was a done deal. I was completely blindsided. At first, I assumed they had some well-thought-out plan, like moving into a smaller home that better suited their needs, maybe a retirement community or a condo that would be easier to maintain. But no, that was not their plan at all. Their plan, without ever asking us, was to move into our vacation home for 6 months while they figured things out. I was absolutely floored. They had assumed, without a single conversation, that they could just waltz in and take over our space. A space that we actively use, a space that has reservations already set up for paying guests, a space that we built for our enjoyment. It was not just an assumption, it was an expectation. They truly believed that because they were family, we would automatically agree. I immediately told my husband that this was not going to work for me. We use the house frequently, and we rely on the rental income during peak seasons. We have planned visits from friends and other family members throughout the year. This was not just a simple inconvenience, it was a massive disruption. But my husband, who is usually rational and reasonable, suddenly started softening. He felt guilty. He kept saying, "They are my parents. We can make it work." I, on the other hand, was furious. I asked him why they had not consulted us before selling their house. If their plan had always involved staying in our home, why not bring it up beforehand? Why keep it a secret until it was too late for us to even discuss alternatives? His response: "I think they were afraid we would say no." Exactly. Because the answer is no. But now, because they had already set everything in motion, they were trying to guilt-trip us into letting them move in. They kept saying they had nowhere else to go. They started offering to pay us significantly more than what they had previously contributed, but let's be real, that would not make up for the disruption, the loss of privacy, and the financial impact of not being able to rent the place out. When I stood firm, they turned to emotional manipulation. They told my husband that they never expected to be treated this way by their own son. They made comments about how families should take care of each other, how they had sacrificed so much for him growing up, and how they could not believe we were being so selfish. The best part? They started acting like they were victims of some unexpected tragedy, as if this was not entirely their choice. They made this decision, and now they wanted us to bear the consequences. The tension between my husband and me has been growing because of this. I told him that I am not budging. We have been good to them. We have always welcomed them, hosted them, and included them in our lives. But this? This is an unreasonable demand, and I refuse to be bullied into giving up our home just because they made an impulsive decision. He is still stuck in the middle, wavering between trying to support me and feeling obligated to help them. And the in-laws? They are ramping up their guilt campaign, telling extended family members that we are refusing to help them in their time of need. I feel awful, but at the same time, I am angry. This is not fair. They are not victims. They are grown adults who made a choice without thinking things through, and now they are expecting us to fix it. So, am I the asshole for refusing to let them move in? Because right now, I feel like the only sane person in the room. Update 1. After all the discussions, all the drama, all the firm no responses, my in-laws just went ahead and did it anyway. One evening, my husband and I were getting ready for a weekend at our vacation home, excited to escape for a bit, when I got an odd notification from the security system, movement detected inside. At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was a glitch or maybe just some wildlife triggering the cameras. But something didn't sit right. I opened the app, pulled up the live feed, and my stomach dropped. There they were. My in-laws. Unloading boxes, getting comfortable, acting like they belonged there. I stared at the screen, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. They weren't just stopping by. They weren't waiting for us to arrive. They were moving in. Like squatters. Like we hadn't explicitly told them no. Like they hadn't spent the last several weeks guilt-tripping us for turning them away. I called my husband over, shoving the phone into his hands. He blinked at the footage, his expression shifting from confusion to shock to something unreadable. Call them, I snapped, already dialing his mom's number myself. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. He tried his dad. Same result. Texts were left unread. They were ghosting us. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears as anger flooded through me. I wasn't even sure I had words for how absolutely unhinged this was. This wasn't just an overstep, it was a complete violation of boundaries, of respect, of common decency. My husband hesitated, still looking at his phone like he was hoping some rational explanation would magically appear, but I wasn't waiting for him to catch up. I grabbed my keys. We're going, I said, and he didn't argue. The drive down was silent, tension thick in the air. I had no idea what I was walking into, but I knew one thing, I wasn't letting them get away with this. My mind raced through scenarios. What if they refused to leave? What if they had already changed the locks? What if my husband caved? I gripped the wheel tighter. No. Not this time. By the time we pulled up to the house, it was surreal. Lights were on. The curtains were drawn like someone lived there. My house, our house, looked like it had been claimed by someone else. I barely had the car in park before I was out, marching up to the door. My husband was slower, trailing behind me as I knocked, hard. The door opened and there was my mother-in-law, standing there like nothing was wrong, like she was expecting us for a casual visit. Oh, she said, surprised. We didn't think you'd be coming this weekend. I didn't even let her finish. What the hell are you doing here? My voice was sharp, shaking with fury. My father-in-law appeared behind her, arms crossed, already on the defensive. Well, we didn't really have any other choice, he said, as if that was some kind of justification. As if that somehow explained how they had taken over our home without permission. I stepped inside, scanning the place, and my blood boiled. This wasn't just them staying for a little while. They had moved in. Clothes in the closets. Food in the fridge. Family photos, their family photos, on the walls. A pile of mail with their name on it stacked on the counter. And the final insult. Their dog, lounging on my couch like it owned the place. I turned to my husband, waiting for him to say something, to do something. To be on my side. But he just stood there, frozen, caught between his parents and me. And I knew. If I didn't take control of this situation, they were never going to leave. I took a deep breath, forcing down the fury enough to make myself crystal clear. You need to leave. Now. My voice was steady, but there was no mistaking the steel in it. Of course, they didn't take that well. My mother-in-law gasped, looking genuinely hurt, like I had just slapped her. We have nowhere else to go, she said, her voice trembling, like they were victims of some unforeseen tragedy instead of two grown adults who had made a reckless decision and expected us to clean up the mess. I didn't flinch. That's not my problem. That set them off. The guilt-tripping escalated at lightning speed. They went on about how much they had sacrificed for my husband growing up, how they had never imagined being treated this way by their own son, how they thought family was supposed to take care of each other. They acted like we had abandoned them in some gutter instead of refusing to hand over our home to them indefinitely. I stood firm, refusing to get sucked into their emotional manipulation. You had months to tell us you were selling your house. You didn't. You had time to make a plan. You didn't. Instead, you just assumed we'd give up our home for you. That's not how this works. My father-in-law scoffed, muttering about how selfish we were, how ungrateful, how they couldn't believe this was happening. My mother-in-law started crying. Full-on, dramatic sobbing. My husband looked torn, glancing between me and them like he didn't know which way to go. I didn't waver. You have 48 hours. After that, I'm calling the police. Silence. Then another explosion of outrage. My mother-in-law practically shrieked, demanding to know how I could even think about calling the cops on family. My father-in-law shook his head in disgust, muttering that they had clearly raised my husband wrong, if this was how he was letting me treat them. That was when my husband finally snapped out of whatever spell they had put him under. We told you no, he said, his voice firm. You crossed a line. You need to leave. That was it. The final blow. My in-laws realized there was no winning this. They gathered their things, dragging it out as long as possible, making sure we knew just how heartless we were. There were more tears, more guilt trips, more passive-aggressive comments about how they never expected this from us. But they left. And when that door finally shut behind them, I exhaled, tension draining from my body. My husband finally backed me up, and after a lot of yelling and tears on their end, they left, but not before making sure we knew just how heartless we were. Update 2. A week after kicking them out, things seemed to settle. My husband and I were still tense, still working through the fallout of what had happened, but I was relieved to have my home back. The vacation house was ours again, and though the shadows of their invasion still lingered, I could finally breathe. The space felt like ours again. The bed I had felt too disgusted to sleep in after they had taken over was fresh with newly washed sheets. The air smelled like our candles again, not the cloying scent of my mother-in-law's overpowering perfume. The fridge was finally emptied of the foods they had stocked, the ones I never bought, never planned to eat, but somehow still found occupying space in my kitchen. I felt lighter with each passing day, like I was slowly shaking off a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. The silence from my in-laws was an unexpected gift. No texts, no calls, no guilt-laden voicemails dripping with passive aggression. Nothing. I imagined they were stewing somewhere, licking their wounds, trying to reframe what had happened in a way that made them the victims. But for the first time in weeks, I didn't care. I had no interest in rehashing the drama, no patience left for their delusions, no energy to entertain whatever twisted justifications they had no doubt convinced themselves were reasonable. Then, the phone call came. It was from one of our regular renters, a woman who had been booking our vacation home for years, someone who never had an issue, never called about anything except the occasional question about check-in. Her voice was different this time, hesitant, cautious, like she wasn't sure if she was about to step into a mess she had no business being in. She told me she had just received an email saying her reservation had been cancelled because the property was no longer available for rent. The words barely registered at first. My brain rejected them, tried to rearrange them into something that made sense. But there was no logical reason for it. I hadn't cancelled anything. My husband hadn't cancelled anything. Our calendar had been solidly booked, and we relied on those bookings. My stomach clenched. I told her I'd look into it immediately and hung up, hands already moving to log into our rental account. My pulse hammered as the page loaded, a sick feeling creeping up my spine. And then, when I saw it, my breath caught in my throat. Every single upcoming booking, gone. Weeks of reservations, deleted. Thousands of dollars in rentals, vanished. The sick feeling turned into full-body nausea as I scrolled, clicking through the history, desperately trying to make sense of what I was looking at. Cancelled. 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 And then I saw it. Our home was listed under a different account. A new listing. Same property, same address, but with a different name. Cozy beach retreat, long-term rental available. My stomach churned as I read the description, the way they had twisted our carefully curated listing into something new, something not ours. The price was lower. The description had been rewritten. And the worst part? The listing had new pictures. Not our professional photos, the ones we had taken to make the place look as beautiful and inviting as possible. These were different. Darker, slightly skewed, the angles all wrong. And then it hit me. These were taken while my in-laws were squatting there. It was like a slap to the face. They had done this. They had somehow accessed our rental platform, wiped our bookings, and relist our house as if it were theirs. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a mistake. This was calculated. This was deliberate. They hadn't just pushed boundaries, hadn't just overstayed their welcome. They had literally tried to steal our home out from under us. A slow, seething rage built in my chest, hotter than anything I had ever felt before. This wasn't just another selfish move, another act of entitlement. This was theft. This was fraud. This was them looking at something that we built, something we sacrificed for, something that belonged to us, and deciding it was theirs to take. And the worst part? They had done it so casually. They hadn't even tried to cover their tracks. They had been so confident, so sure of their right to do whatever they wanted, that they had taken over our listing like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like they had been owed this home all along. I confronted them immediately, hands shaking, blood roaring in my ears. Their response was infuriatingly flippant. They brushed it off, acting as if I was making a big deal out of nothing. They genuinely didn't see what they had done as wrong. They claimed they thought we weren't using it enough and figured, this way, we could all make a little money. As if that was a reasonable explanation. As if it was their decision to make. As if they hadn't just obliterated our carefully planned rental income, disrupted our schedule, and made a complete mockery of our boundaries. I saw red. I don't even remember everything I said, but I know my voice shook with fury. Every ounce of patience, every attempt at civility, every shred of restraint I had left evaporated. This wasn't just overstepping. This wasn't just manipulation. This was stealing. This was sabotage. They had deliberately gone behind our backs, hijacked our income, and tried to take ownership of something that had never been theirs to begin with. And yet, even then, they refused to acknowledge what they had done. They downplayed it, claimed it was just a misunderstanding. They twisted it, saying they were helping, that they had done us a favor, that we were being dramatic. They actually thought they could spin this into something positive, as if we should be grateful that they had taken it upon themselves to manage our home. My mother-in-law even had the audacity to look hurt, as if I was the one being unreasonable, as if she was the victim because I didn't appreciate her efforts. But my husband, finally, saw them for what they were. The blinders came off. The hesitation, the guilt, the need to give them the benefit of the doubt, it all shattered. He was livid. He saw the betrayal, the deceit, the sheer audacity of what they had done. And he was done making excuses for them. We immediately contacted the rental platform, explained everything, and got their fraudulent listing removed. It took some back and forth, and we had to submit proof that we were the rightful owners, but eventually, the listing was taken down and our account was secured. We reached out to every renter who had been affected, explained the situation, and did our best to make things right. But I wasn't taking any more chances. We locked down every account, changed every password, and enabled every security feature available. Then, just to be safe, we changed the locks on the vacation home. Update 3. After the listing fiasco, we went no contact for a while. It wasn't some dramatic declaration, no final screaming match or long-winded explanation. We were just done. My husband, torn between his love for his parents and the betrayal he could no longer deny, finally accepted that they had crossed a line that couldn't be walked back. There were no excuses left to make, no rationalizations that could justify what they had done. Their actions had been intentional, calculated, and deceitful, and no amount of emotional manipulation could change that. At first, the silence was unsettling. No calls, no texts, no passive-aggressive emails dripping with self-pity and guilt. It was eerily quiet, and I could tell my husband was struggling with it. He had spent his whole life being conditioned to put their feelings first, to bend over backward for them, to never be the bad guy. But even he couldn't justify their actions this time. He was hurting, but he understood. He knew there was no coming back from this. And for the first time in months, we had peace. The vacation home was secure. Our finances were back on track. Our daily lives weren't consumed by the constant anxiety of what my in-laws would do next. I was finally starting to feel like myself again, no longer living under the shadow of their entitlement. My husband was still processing, still working through the emotional wreckage they had left behind, but we were healing. Slowly, steadily, we were rebuilding what they had tried to tear apart. Then came the knock on the door. It was late, just after dinner, when we heard it. A sharp, deliberate rap, the kind that sent an immediate wave of unease through me. My husband hesitated, exchanging a glance with me before heading toward the door. The moment he opened it, I knew. The man standing there, dressed in a suit, holding a thick envelope in his hands, wasn't a friend or neighbor. He was a process server. My in-laws were suing us. The shock of it hit like a punch to the gut. It was so insane, so completely beyond anything I had expected, that for a brief moment, I thought there had to be some mistake. But no. The documents were real. The claims inside them were real. And they were ridiculous. They were suing us on the grounds of implied residency, claiming that because they had occasionally contributed small amounts of money toward maintenance, they had been led to believe that they had a right to live in our vacation home. They were arguing that we had wrongfully evicted them, causing them emotional distress and financial hardship. They painted themselves as victims, as two poor, helpless parents who had been cruelly thrown out by their heartless son and his cold, ungrateful wife. Reading through it made my blood boil. The sheer audacity of it. Their contributions had been laughably small, insignificant, really. A couple of utility payments here, some money toward minor repairs there. Nothing that even remotely entitled them to residency. And yet, here they were, trying to manipulate the legal system the same way they had tried to manipulate us. We didn't hesitate. We lawyered up immediately. Thankfully, their case was weak. Embarrassingly weak. They had no proof of any agreement, no written documentation, no lease, nothing that suggested they had any legal right to our home. Their financial contributions were minuscule, barely even registering in the grand scheme of things. Our lawyer tore their claims apart piece by piece, dismantling every flimsy argument they had tried to build. The court date came, and watching them sit across from us, still trying to play the part of the wounded victims, was almost surreal. My mother-in-law dabbed at her eyes dramatically, shaking her head in disbelief as if she was the one who had been wronged. My father-in-law sat rigid, jaw clenched, acting like he was enduring some great injustice. And my husband? He looked at them with something I hadn't seen before. Not anger. Not hurt. Just disgust. The judge didn't buy their story for a second. They were called out for their entitlement, for their baseless claims, for the sheer ridiculousness of their lawsuit. The dismissal was swift, the ruling in our favor absolute. And as we walked out of that courtroom, watching them slink away, humiliated and defeated, I thought this has to be the end of it. I was wrong. Instead of apologizing, instead of reflecting on the mess they had created, they doubled down. In their minds, we were the villains. We had forced them into this position. We had left them no choice. They spun their narrative to extended family, to anyone who would listen, playing the part of the abandoned parents, cruelly cast aside after years of sacrifice. That was the last straw for my husband. He had spent his whole life making excuses for them, brushing off their behavior, telling himself that's just how they are. But this? This was different. They had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. They had taken their entitlement to the extreme, had weaponized their own selfishness in a way that had permanently shattered any remaining illusion he had of them. He saw them now for exactly who they were, and there was no going back. We cut contact completely. No lingering connections, no occasional check-ins. Nothing. They were blocked on every platform, their numbers silenced, their access to us severed entirely. It was the hardest thing my husband had ever done, but it was also the most necessary. They ended up moving to a condo a few months later, thanks to my husband's cousin, who had stepped in to help them out. And, in true form, they never once thanked him. Because in their minds, they were still owed something. Gratitude was beneath them. As for us, we made sure this would never happen again. We changed all our security settings, upgraded our cameras, and took every possible step to ensure that our vacation home, our home, was protected. And our marriage? It was rocky for a while. The damage they had done, the stress they had caused, had left cracks we had to work through. But after seeing the full extent of their manipulation, my husband finally understood why I had stood my ground from the very beginning. He saw how deeply they had tried to infiltrate our lives, how much they had expected to take from us, and he knew, truly knew, that they were never going to stop. He apologized for not backing me up sooner. For not seeing it when I did. For letting his guilt keep him on the fence for as long as it had. And I forgave him. Because in the end, we came out stronger. Stronger than their manipulation. Stronger than their entitlement. Stronger than them.